All right, as we speak, the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, is in the air with 3 released American hostages who are on their way back, thankfully, to the United States after spending months inside hard labor prison camps across North Korea. Now, this was a major diplomatic win for the president and the Trump administration, and a very important step forward for North Korea. And most importantly, 3 American lives, thankfully, were saved. Now, President Trump's historic summit with Kim Jong-un is now moving forward as planned. Take a look.
I appreciate Kim Jong-un doing this and allowing them to go. We've picked a time, we've picked a place for the meeting, or summit, as you like to call it. And I think it'll be very successful. But as I always say, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? But it's going to be a very important event. Again, I think this is something that nobody thought was going to happen for years or more.
Where's the summit going to take place?
We're going to announce that in 3 days, Joe. Within 3 days.
Within 3 days?
We're just working arrangements. But
will it be DMZ?
It will not be there. No.
Do you deserve the Nobel Prize, do you think?
Everyone thinks so, but I would never say it. You know what I want to do? I want to get it finished. The prize I want is victory for the world, not for even here. I want victory for the world, because that's what we're talking about. So that's the only prize I want.
A date has now been set for this upcoming meeting between Trump and Kim Jong-un, and we'll let you know all the details as we get them. Let me be clear. This diplomatic progress, it is no accident. When President Trump took the reins from Barack Obama while a little rocket man was launching his ballistic missiles over Japan, he was threatening Guam, threatening the rest of the world, and, of course, testing nuclear weapons left and right, and, of course, ballistic missiles. Now, all of these aggressive tactics have ended, at least for the moment. This thanks to the hard work, the negotiating skills of the president and his brand new Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. Now, after tightening sanctions, developing a strong relationship with the president of China, and threatening to introduce new tariffs, sending multiple carrier strike groups to the region, and berating Kim Jong-un on the world stage, the North Korean dictator is now limping to the negotiating table, and it's on the terms of the United States. But wait, hang on. Remember, just a few months ago, your media, your corrupt, destroy Trump media, was telling you that Donald Trump was leading us to a nuclear war with North Korea. Oh, how could they ever get something like that wrong? Typical. Take a look.
The idea of a nuclear showdown with North Korea keeps you up at night? I would recommend deleting your Twitter app.
He is not merely being cavalier with a threat about nuclear war. He's being cavalier in a way that makes him seem demented.
These are the messages from a person who is not well, from a leader who is not fit for office.
President Trump is goading Kim Jong-un to test a nuclear missile again, to prove its reliability, to show him wrong. And fundamentally, I think it comes across as 2 kindergarteners who are jostling each other, except that each has nuclear weapons.
Well, here's what...
Too late after 100,000 Americans die.
After a nuclear holocaust.
Or after 1 million die in Seattle.
And that's where we are. This is not an exaggeration.
Trump's comments about nuclear weapons have experts worried he could literally inadvertently trigger a catastrophe.
Yeah, that typical media barrage didn't end well or age well. So I wonder if the mainstream media, they're going to apologize for their hysterical coverage, just like their phony Russian coverage, just like everything else they get wrong. Now, it's unlikely because just yesterday, yes, the New York Times, the paper of record, they actually slammed Secretary of State Mike Pompeo because he was absent during President Trump's Iran nuclear deal announcement. Well, then they found out he was actually in North Korea, rescuing and saving American hostages, something Barack Obama could never get done. Now, Trump responded just 2 hours ago on Twitter. He wrote, the failing New York Times criticized the Secretary of State, Pompeo, for being AWOL, missing, when in fact he was flying to North Korea. Fake news so bad. Now, we're going to get back to the abusively biased media in just a moment. But first, we are also following very closely a developing situation inside of Iran. The IDF is reporting that Israel's Iron Dome was able to intercept multiple rockets that were fired by Iranian sources from a Syrian base. No injuries have been reported. I just got off the phone with a high-ranking Israeli official who has now confirmed to me that this was in response to Israel's military actions. And in fact, I have confirmation Israel tonight, not long ago, has retaliated We're going to have more on that in a moment with Colonel Oliver North. But first, yesterday, President Trump made the important decision to pull America out of that incredibly flawed Iranian nuclear deal. Now, in a few weeks, U.S. sanctions against Iran will be reinstated, likely squeezing this rogue nation economically. And essentially, Iran will now have less money to fund, their proxy wars in Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, their funding of terrorism around the world, their weapon systems that are aimed at Israel and other allies in the region. And, of course, the corrupt Islamist political leaders in Iran and the Mullahs, they're not taking this so well. You had petulant Iranian lawmakers yelling, once again, death to America from the parliament floor, and even burning an American flag, as you can see. In other words, a pretty normal Tuesday from the parliament in Tehran. Now, meanwhile, Iran's supreme leader went on a totally unhinged Twitter rant saying the U.S. president's shallow, ludicrous behavior wasn't unexpected. The same behavior existed in previous U.S. presidents, yet the Iranian nation is persistent while former U.S. presidents passed away and the Islamic Republic of Iran is still standing. This man's corpse will also be worm food while the Islamic Republic stands strong. This is coming from a man, President Obama. Think about this. Trusted and handed over $150 billion to. And a promise he got back, well, we're not going to build nukes, but he got to continue to spin those centrifuges. Now, naturally, the mullahs of Iran are also threatening to ramp up their uranium enrichment program. President Trump is not bowing down to these empty threats. Let's take a look.
What are you going to do if Iran starts up their nuclear program again?
Iran will find out. They're going to find out. I don't think they should do that. I would advise Iran not to start their nuclear program. I would advise them very strongly. If they do, there will be very severe consequence. Okay?
Now, sadly, Iran's morally corrupt political leaders aren't the only ones melting down over the president's decision. Yeah, your very own mainstream media, they are also in freak-out mode yet again. I guess they didn't learn from their North Korean coverage. Take a look.
A decision by the president that some say marks the United States' biggest self-inflicted foreign policy wound since the Iraq War.
What we heard was not foreign policy, it was vandalism.
Doesn't this give Iran a propaganda win?
Of course. I guess the good news here is that John Bolton is finally getting the war he's always wanted.
It reinforces the notion that we are something of a rogue country, that we don't honor or live up to our international commitments.
Is he just keeping a campaign promise here? Do we know what he pulled out of? Does he know what he pulled out?
The totality of this president's behavior and decisions does lead me to question why he does anything and whether or not it's to deflect from something else. I don't think he has the moral compass to make a decision based on our own national security.
It's almost like I can't believe anything he does because it seems to be based on a personal antagonism to Obama and a jealousy.
Every night now we get more and more evidence. Journalism in this country is dead and buried. I told you in 2007 and 8. Now this brand new Iran hysteria is only the latest example proving our point. Now let's turn to some important news. Now the president's pick to head the CIA, Gina Haspel. She testified powerfully today before the Senate Intelligence Committee as her confirmation process is now underway. As I have said many times on this program, that woman, Ms. Haspel, is an American patriot and hero. Her work in the CIA after 9/11 saved countless of American lives. It brought terrorists to justice. Still, you have some Democrats attacking Haspel for supporting legal programs that they claim now were too tough on jihadists, on terrorists, forcing Haspel to defend her incredible track record. Take a look at this outrage.
I would really like to have on the record whether you ever called for the program to be continued, which it sure sounds to me like your answer suggested. You said, well, we were doing our job. It ought to be continued. That troubles me very much.
Let me say this about myself. After 9/11, I didn't look to go sit on the Swiss desk. I stepped up. I was not on the sidelines. I was on the front lines in the Cold War, and I was on the front lines in the fight against al-Qaeda.
Very simple. You have an operations officer who is captured. He's being waterboarded. I've asked you very simply, would you determine that to be immoral and something that should never be done, condoned in any way, shape, or form? Your response seems to be that Civilized nations don't do it, but uncivilized nations do it, or uncivilized groups do it.
The United States does it.
A civilized nation was doing it until it was outlawed by this Congress.
Senator, I would never obviously support inhumane treatment of any CIA officers. We've lost CIA officers over the years to terrorists. I just gave an example. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed personally killed a Wall Street Journal correspondent and filmed that. I don't think there's any comparison between CIA officers serving their country, adhering to U.S. law, and terrorists who, by their very definition, are not following anybody's law.
And people need to look at that beheading. And by the way, only 3 people, including that man, were actually waterboarded under intense medical supervision. The New York Times reported last night that 9/11 mastermind, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, asked a military judge to share information with the Intel Committee prior to HASPEL's confirmation hearings. Really? We're going to let that guy give information? It is unbelievable, despicable, it's disgusting. 9/11-2001, we lost 3,000 Americans. Now, today, Senate Democrats slammed the CIA's interrogation tactics against KSM, but HASPEL provided very important context about this terrorist. I hope people remember. Take a look.
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was the architect and mastermind of the 9/11 attacks. His nephew, Ramzi Youssef, was behind the 93 attack on the World Trade Center, and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed financed that operation. He also was behind the infamous Bojinka plot in the Philippines. Tragically, he was the individual who personally killed a Wall Street Journal American correspondent and filmed that heinous act. He also, after 9/11, carried out an attack on a synagogue in Tunisia, and he had other attacks planned. We were able to warn allies about a planned attack, for example, on Heathrow Airport.
You want to see the most evil, despicable act besides 9/11? Go video the beheading of that reporter of which she's referring to. Now, remember, former top CIA official Jose Rodriguez, he's been on this program many times, and back in 2014, he reminded us that the interrogation program against KSM, one of 3 people waterboarded, it actually led our intelligence officials to the career of Osama bin Laden, which led us to Osama bin Laden. Take a look. So, in other words, you're saying that the accusation that these enhanced interrogation techniques were used beyond what had already been disclosed, you're saying is false, number one, and that in spite of their suggestion that they were not successful, you're saying that, in fact, that's not true. You were there. It was successful.
It was very successful, and for those of us who were there, it is just amazing that they could have come to this conclusion. Those of us who read the intelligence coming out of our black sites every morning and who acted on that intelligence know the value, and basically it led to the destruction of the organization.
It was successful. They were there. Jose Rodriguez, Gina Haspel, thank you for your service to your country. And America now needs you more than ever. It's high time for the U.S. Senate and these guys on their high horse after the fact to confirm your nomination. Finally tonight, more evidence that the deep state is crumbling. It has been 1 year since President Trump fired James Comey, on the recommendation in part of Rod Rosenstein, and it looks like he's longing for his days as America's top deep state arbiter. Now, Comey tweeted out a picture of himself, well, naturally, along with the caption, "Missing the people of the FBI today." Well, many that I talk to aren't missing him. Thank you for your commitment to the truth and for all you do for the good of the country, etc. Of course, Comey was fired for his less than truthful handling of the Clinton investigation, like when he lied about not writing the exoneration in May before interviewing Hillary Clinton in July and 17 other key people, or when he turned the other way as Clinton destroyed evidence, bleach bit, acid wash, deleting subpoenaed emails. And let's not forget, by the way, about Comey's FISA abuse, using Hillary's bought and paid for dirty dossier full of lies put together by a foreign national to lie to a FISA court judge to spy on a Trump campaign associate. And we could go on, but you've heard it before. We don't have all night. Instead, we do have some good news to bring you tonight from the ongoing obstruction in the Department of Justice. Fox News is reporting that the House chairman of the House Intel Committee, Chairman Nunes and Chairman Gowdy, they have now been invited by the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, to the DOJ for a briefing about the latest requests from Chairman Nunes regarding the Russia investigation. This, of course, came after a call between the White House Chief of Staff, John Kelly, and the Justice Department and their officials. Unfortunately, this briefing will be, of course, classified, but maybe, finally, after subpoena, after redaction, after slow walking, maybe the sign that the DOJ cooperation could be improving. I guess the threat of contempt of Congress, well, maybe that had an impact, too. They have been slow walking thousands of subpoena documents of Congress. They have been putting in heavily redacted comments. They've been claiming national security is at risk when, in fact, it's been proven at times not to be at risk. We asked the question on this program, Rod Rosenstein, what does the Department of Justice have to hide?